Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So let's see, what do I have to share with you today? Let me give you a hint. I'm wearing pink. It's Wednesday, or at least it is if you're watching this when I post it. That could only mean one thing. It's time for my Mean Girls review. I was super excited. Literally, this came in the mail this afternoon and I immediately was like, I have to film. I can film and get this up on Wednesday. It's perfect. So in case you've been hiding under a rock, this is the new Storybook Cosmetics Burn book, which is actually in collaboration with Mean Girls. They have, they got licensing to do this, so it's legit. And of course, it's the same adorable book shape, just like their other books. So I now have the Mean Girls, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and the Wizardry and Witchcraft book. My bookshelf is so happy. So I figured, obviously, I'll give you kind of like a mini review. I mean, I already have really high hopes for this palette just because I've always enjoyed the Storybook Cosmetics shadows. So I'll definitely give you my thoughts either during or at the end if there's anything different about them when I use them. But I figured this is such a fun, colorful palette. Of course, the first thought I had was that I really just wanted to do 2 looks with it because I love the different directions you can go in here. Same thing with the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory palette. It's just so fun and colorful. So I'm gonna go ahead and do 2 looks. Let me give you a quick little close-up of the palette. So those are the gorgeous colors. And I probably will do something that involves the pink because, I have to, but I really want to maybe use this blue or some of these other tones because I feel like a lot of the looks that I've seen from people that already got the palette, centered around the pink look, which of course is Mean Girls pink, but I want to do something a little bit different as well. So if you'd like to see 2 different looks using this palette, then just stay tuned. Look 1. All right, so first out, I'm starting off with a fluffy brush in the color So Fetch, and I'm just working this through the crease. Then I'm adding a little bit extra out on the outer V and up on the brow bone. Next, with a more tapered blending brush, I'm going into Glen Cocoa and using that to slightly darken up the crease. I'm doing this very lightly, and then I'm going to place a little bit more of that lovely brown color on the actual outer portion of my lid. Then back into So Fetch just to blend the colors together. Now with a flat dry brush, I'm going into the shade Is Butter a Carb? And I'm using that on the center portion of the lid, basically from where the brown shade ends, and I'm stopping before I get to the inner portion. Then I decided I want a little bit more oomph, so I put some of the color on my brush and sprayed it with some setting spray, and you'll see that that really makes it a gorgeous gold tone. Now with that same flat brush, I'm using Regina George, and of course I'm going to spray this with some setting spray again because this one really does look gorgeous when you spray it with setting spray. And I'm just using this on the inner half of my eye. And I went ahead and added that color onto the inner corner as a highlight. Now with a dense blending brush, I'm going into the shade She Doesn't Even Go Here, and I'm using this to darken up the outer V. I'm kind of just placing the color at first, and then I'm blending it softly a little bit into the crease and kind of a little bit out, just kind of blending back and forth. Now with a flat angled dry brush, I'm going back into She Doesn't Even Go Here, and I'm using this to actually line the upper lid. So just take your time with this since it's not wet. You don't want to have a bunch of fallout. So I'm kind of just going back into the palette and then stamping on the lid, back in the palette, stamping on the lid. That's the easiest way to not cause any fallout by doing this. Then I decided to add just a little mini wing. It's mostly just a line. Then I'm taking that same shade and I'm lining the lower lash line. I'm going almost all the way. I'm stopping just after halfway. And I decided to finish it off with So Fetch so that there's a little bit of that lighter orange tone towards the inner part of the eye, and then I blend them together. Then with the pencil brush, I'm going into the shade You Can't Sit With Us, and I'm just blending this right underneath those colors. Last but not least, I'm taking the Plastics on a fluffy brush, and I'm just using this to highlight the brow bone. Then to finish off the look, I'm using some liner in the waterline. This is the ColourPop liner in Mr. Bing. So just any kind of nice brown tone would go nicely. And then a good coat of some thick black mascara. For lips, I'm using the shade Bewitched from Makeup Monsters. I love this color. I don't think it's sold anymore, but it's a gorgeous berry tone. And this is the finished first look. It's very fall appropriate and I absolutely love it. On to look 2. So for this look, I decided to start out by using the plastics all over the lid and up on the brow bone, kind of mostly to set the primer. And then I went in with a fluffy brush into You Can't Sit With Us and blended that through the crease and made sure I got it nicely up on the brow bone a little bit as well. Now I'm using a fluffy flat brush that's dry and I'm going into the shade Wednesday. You need to be very careful with this shade. It is very pigmented and it has a lot of fallout if you're not careful. So I am just placing the color and patting it down and then very softly blending it. That's the easiest way to work with really pigmented shadows like this. That way you won't get a lot of fallout. I really didn't end up with any fallout at all by just carefully placing the color. And of course I'm leaving the center blank for my halo. Now taking a flat brush, I'm spraying with some setting spray and going into the shade Gruel, which is an awesome like greenish gold color and it's a very soft shadow. And when you wet it, it just looks like melted metal and it's beautiful. So I'm using this on the center portion of the lid and I decided just to go ahead and leave the center completely blank, like only use it for this shade instead of topping it off with the pink across. And I love the way it came out. And you'll notice that when your brush starts getting dry, that the color isn't as amped anymore, so just spray it again and keep going. Now for the lower lash line, I'm taking a flat angled brush that's dry, going back into the Wednesday shade, and I'm basically mirroring the top. I'm just placing this color on the inner and outer portion of the lower lash line. And then for the center of the lid, I'm using the flat brush, but I did spray it, and I'm just using that Gruel color to make that accent, and I am dragging it down a little bit lower on my lash line. Then I took that same fluffy flat brush from earlier and went back into Wednesday just to kind of smoke it out a bit. And lastly, back into You Can't Sit With Us just to kind of blend the upper crease area together a little bit better. And for a little inner corner highlight, I just went back into Regina George just to add a little bit of brightness. Now to finish off this look, I'm doing some nice thick black winged liner with my Tarte double-ended liner, and of course then adding a couple of layers of my L'Oreal Voluminous Lash Paradise mascara. For lips, I'm using the Too Faced Peach Kiss lipstick in Sunday Funday. And then I'm topping it with the Fenty Beauty Gloss Bomb just to give it a beautiful glossy shine. And here is the finished second look. So much fun, I love this. All right, so I know that I said I really wanted to use this blue color, and I actually really wanted to use this silver color as well, and as you can tell, I have not used those yet. So think of this as a bonus third look that I really wasn't planning on doing. So I kind of just removed the eyeshadow from my lids and my lower lash line. I didn't really, scrub hard to get off the liner and the mascara, so there's only so much removing of my eye makeup that I can handle within a time frame. So I'm gonna do just a little bonus third look with the blue and silver shades, and then I'll just go over the wing and mascara again, and this will be a 3-look video. Okay, now on to the voiceover. All right, so starting with my favorite transition shade, You Can't Sit With Us, just running this through the crease on a fluffy brush. Then I'm taking that fluffy brush and going back into the plastics and just dusting this all over the lid and on the brow bone. Now I'm taking my flat brush and spraying it with some setting spray, and then I'm going into the shade Mouse, duh, and I'm going to just place that on the inner portion of the lid. So I found with this it was easiest just to kind of drag the color where I wanted it to go first. So I'm just making sure I get the area covered that I want to be silver. And then I'm going to spray the brush again and go back in and just amp up that silver shade. So here is where you can see I'm doing kind of a second layer with the wet brush again. And then I went ahead and added it to the inner corner and dragged it down a little bit. Now with that same brush that I resprayed with my setting spray, I'm going into the shade Cool Mom, and I'm using this to basically finish off the other half of the lid. So I basically have kind of like a diagonal where the two colors meet, and then I'm just doing 2 layers of this blue shade. Now I'm going in with a dense fluffy brush into Cool Mom, and I'm using this to kind of flare it out on the outer V as well as bring it into the crease a little bit. Then I'm taking a really fluffy blending brush and going into the shade October 3rd, and I'm very, very lightly dragging this softly through the crease. I just want a little bit of depth. And now I'm going over my liner again, and as you can see, I ended up with an incredibly thick wing, but you know, sometimes you just gotta roll with it. And then of course, another 2 coats of really thick mascara. And for lips, I'm using the Storybook Cosmetics Liquid Lipstick in Fantasy. And here is the third and final look. Alright guys, so I just wanted to come on here and do a quick little wrap up before I go, because I know this video is probably already long enough as it is. I will say that I think this palette is fantastic. As far as quality in comparison to their previous 2 palettes, I think it's spot on. I think this color reminds me a lot of the shimmers from the Wizardry and Witchcraft palette, that very soft kind of metallic, but when you wet it, it's like melted metal. It's gorgeous. This color, Wednesday, it's kind of similar to like a shadow from the Subculture palette in terms of being a little bit, well not a little bit, a lot bit. You have a lot of fallout with it and it's just very, very pigmented, but the best way to work with a shadow like that is exactly how you saw me do it. Just pat it on the lid or use a smaller detailed brush to do it. Quite honestly, that's what worked best for me with the Subculture palette, and that worked perfectly just fine with me with this Wednesday color. I really didn't have any problems, but I had seen previous reviews, and actually the second I touched my brush in it, I kind of like knocked a bunch of hot pink powder everywhere, so I knew I needed to be careful with it, and it worked just fine. I didn't have any patchy issues. Actually, I didn't end up with any fallout because I was very delicate in how I put it on. The rest of these shimmer shades are gorgeous. I love the combination of fun, bright colors, but also some nice neutral colors. You could easily use this palette for everyday wear and maybe add just a fun pop of color on the lower lash line. But I mean, these colors right here are nice and basic. Quite frankly, Regina George would be gorgeous all over the lid with just Glen Coco and You Can't Sit With Us kind of blended in the crease. So I love this palette. I love all of the Storybook Cosmetics palettes, quite honestly. I feel like colorful wise, this is very similar to the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory palette, but that I feel like had its own kind of tone to it. It was more like these beautiful watercolors, and it had these bright teals and pinks, but it also had purples and oranges, and it was just like a beautiful watercolor kind of template. This I think has a bit more of your pinks and golden colors with some other fun pops in there. So I think if you had the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory palette, you could still find that these are different shades and they're, you know, unique to this palette. So I own all 3 of their palettes and I love them all equally. So I hope you guys enjoyed the 3 looks that I created with the Storybook Cosmetics Burn Book palette. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and thank you for watching. Bye guys.